My name is Ingrid Fairbanks Webb, and I'm 34 years old. 4 years ago, the night before Mother's Day, I discovered I'd been erased from my own family, removed from our WhatsApp group like a stranger, like someone who never belonged. My mother's message to my siblings was crystal clear. All my children are successful except Ingrid. She chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer see her as my daughter. I didn't scream. I didn't call her crying. I simply disappeared the way she wanted me to. What my mother didn't know was that 4 years later, I'd be standing on a stage in front of 500 people with the governor of Virginia shaking my hand, and she'd be sitting in the audience, uninvited, waiting for a moment in the spotlight that would never come. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. Where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Let me start from the beginning. The night I realized I'd lost the family I thought I had and began building the one I actually deserved. Growing up, the Fairbanks family was what people in our Virginia suburb called picture perfect. My mother, Margaret Fairbanks, retired from her position as a regional bank manager at 55, not because she needed rest, but because she'd finally secured her seat at the Westbrook Country Club. The membership alone cost more than my annual salary. She wore her Hermes scarves like armor, always draped just so over her shoulders, always in muted tones that whispered old money, even though our money was barely a generation old. My sister Victoria was the crown jewel. 38, a plastic surgeon in Richmond with a clientele that included local news anchors and politicians' wives. She posted photos of her Rolex date just casually resting on restaurant tables, her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around champagne flutes at charity galas. Every Thanksgiving, she'd update us on her latest subtle work, as if we couldn't see the tightening around her eyes, the lips that seemed fuller each year. Then there was Bradley, 40 years old, corporate lawyer in D.C., drove a Mercedes G-Wagon that he made sure to park in the most visible spot at every family gathering. He had a wife named Carolyn who collected designer handbags the way some people collect stamps methodically, obsessively, always hunting for the next limited edition. And then there was me, Ingrid, the youngest, the one who didn't quite fit the family portfolio. I was a fourth-grade teacher at Maple Creek Elementary, a small school tucked into the rolling farmland about 90 miles from my mother's pristine colonial revival. My Honda Civic was 12 years old. My apartment could fit inside Victoria's walk-in closet. But here's what no one ever mentioned at those country club brunches. My mother had 2 successful children, a doctor and a lawyer. Not 3, never. I didn't choose teaching because I couldn't do anything else. When I graduated high school, I had a 4.1 GPA and a full scholarship offer to pursue pre-med at UVA, the same path Victoria had taken a decade before. My mother had already ordered the future doctor bumper sticker for her car. She'd told all her friends at the club. The narrative was set, but I'd spent that summer volunteering at a literacy camp for underprivileged kids in our county. There was this boy, Marcus Jr., 8 years old, couldn't read past a first-grade level, had been told his whole life he was slow. By August, he was devouring chapter books. The day he finished Charlotte's Web on his own, he hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. That was the moment I knew. I called my mother that night to tell her I was declining the pre-med scholarship. I was going to study education instead. I wanted to teach elementary school. The silence on the other end lasted 17 seconds. I counted. "You're throwing your life away," she finally said. "For what?" "A government salary and ungrateful children." She didn't come to my college graduation. Said she had a conflict, a garden party at the club that same weekend. Victoria sent a card with a check for $50 and a note that read, "Good luck with your little career." I cashed the check. I needed groceries, but I never forgot the message beneath those words. "You chose wrong. You chose less. And we will never let you forget it. I didn't choose to be poor. I chose meaning." To my mother, those 2 things were exactly the same. The exclusion didn't happen all at once. It crept in slowly, like mold in the corners of a room no one bothered to clean. Thanksgiving 2019. I arrived at my mother's house with a homemade sweet potato casserole, her favorite recipe, the one Grandma Ruth used to make. When I walked into the dining room, I found my place card at the small folding table in the corner, the one set up for Victoria's stepchildren and Bradley's toddler nephew. "Oh, honey, we just ran out of room at the main table," my mother said, adjusting her pearl earrings. "You don't mind, do you? You're so good with children." I was 30 years old. Christmas that year was worse. I'd spent 3 weeks knitting my mother a cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of dove gray. When she opened it, she held it up, smiled, and said, "How handmade." Then she turned to Victoria, who had gifted her a Chanel clutch and spent the next 20 minutes raving about the stitching, the hardware, the craftsmanship. My scarf ended up in the coat closet. I found it there 2 months later, still in the tissue paper, tags I'd carefully removed stuffed back inside, but the final blow came on her birthday in early 2020. I called to ask what time dinner was. "Oh, Ingrid," she said, her voice dripping with practiced regret. "The restaurant only had 6 seats available. Your father, Bradley, and Carolyn Victoria and her date. You understand, don't you? Family comes first." 6 seats, and somehow I wasn't family enough to fill one of them. But all of that, the folding table, the forgotten scarf, the restaurant that didn't have room, none of it prepared me for what came next. The only person in my family who still treated me like I existed was my cousin Rachel. She was 24 then. My Aunt Patricia's daughter, 8 years younger than me, fresh out of college and working her first marketing job in Charlottesville. We'd been close since she was a kid. I used to babysit her on weekends, take her to the library, help her with homework when her own parents were too busy fighting. Rachel was the kind of person who noticed when you were hurting, even when you tried to hide it. The night before Mother's Day 2020, my phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Rachel's name lit up the screen. When I answered, her voice was shaking. "Ingrid, I need to tell you something. I didn't know if I should, but you deserve to know." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Check your WhatsApp." The family group. I opened the app, scrolled to Fairbanks Family Dinner, the group my mother had created 3 years ago to coordinate holidays. I wasn't in it anymore. "Rachel, I know they removed you. Your mom asked Victoria to do it last week, but she only got around to it tonight." Rachel's voice cracked. "Ingrid, I'm so sorry. I screenshot everything. I'm sending it to you now." My phone buzzed. One image, then another. I stared at the screen at my mother's words frozen in digital ink. And something inside me went very, very quiet. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because you're my family," Rachel said. "Even if they've decided you're not theirs." I saved those screenshots in a folder I titled Proof. I didn't know then that I'd need them. I just knew I couldn't let those words disappear. I read that screenshot 47 times that night. Not because I didn't understand the words. I understood them perfectly. I read them over and over because some part of me kept searching for a loophole, a phrase that might mean something different, a context that could soften the blow. There wasn't one. The message was from my mother posted in the family group at 8:32 p.m. Reminder, Mother's Day dinner at the Jefferson 7 p.m. sharp. All my children will be there. All my successful children. Ingrid chose to be a lowly teacher. I no longer see her as my daughter. Please don't mention her name tomorrow. Below it, Victoria had replied with a heart emoji. Just a heart, no protest, no hesitation. Bradley's response. Understood. Mom. 2 words. That's all I was worth to my brother. 2 words and total compliance. I sat on the edge of my bed in my tiny studio apartment, phone clutched in my hands, and I didn't cry. I wanted to God. I wanted to fall apart, to scream into a pillow, to call my mother and demand an explanation. But what would that change? She'd made her decision. She'd announced it to the family like a press release. Ingrid is no longer one of us, and everyone had agreed. I stayed awake until 2 a.m., staring at those messages, reading the timestamps, noticing that not a single person, not my father, not my aunt, not anyone, had pushed back. Rachel was the only one who'd thought to warn me. By sunrise, I'd made a decision of my own. If my mother wanted me gone, I would be gone completely on my own terms. But I would not forget and I would not delete those screenshots. Some receipts you keep forever. Mother's Day morning, I woke up to silence. No calls, no texts, no awkward, "We miss you." Wish. You could make it from Victoria. Nothing. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't send my mother flowers. I didn't call to wish her a happy day. I didn't drive 90 miles to sit at a corner table while she pretended I didn't exist. I made myself coffee. I graded papers. I went for a walk along the creek behind my apartment complex and watched the water catch the morning light. And I thought about my options. I could call her, confront her, demand to know why she'd said those things. Why she'd cut me out. Why being a teacher made me unworthy of her love. I could screenshot her message and post it online. Let the world see what kind of mother raises a doctor, a lawyer, and a daughter she throws away. I could show up at the Jefferson uninvited, make a scene, force them to acknowledge my existence. But what would any of that accomplish? My mother had made her choice. She'd chosen status over her own child. She'd chosen the opinion of women at a country club over the daughter who'd loved her for 3 decades. If she wanted me to disappear, I would give her exactly what she asked for. But not because she demanded it, because I chose it. I blocked her number that afternoon, then Victoria's, then Bradley's. I deleted Instagram so I wouldn't have to see their curated family photos. I didn't know then that my silence would last 4 years. I didn't know that those 4 years would change everything. All I knew in that quiet moment was this. I would not beg to be loved by people who saw me as a stain on their reputation. The world kept spinning and the Fairbanks family kept pretending I was never part of it. 6 months after that Mother's Day, Rachel called me with an update I hadn't asked for. "Thanksgiving photos are up," she said quietly. "Victoria posted them an hour ago." I told myself I wouldn't look. I lasted 3 hours. The image showed my mother at the head of her formal dining table, flanked by Victoria and Bradley, their spouses arranged perfectly behind them. Crystal stemware caught the light. A massive turkey glistened in the center. The caption read, "Grateful for my amazing family. Mom, you raised us right." 3 people, not 4. My chair wasn't even empty. They'd simply reconfigured as if the table had always been set for 6 instead of 8. By Christmas, I'd stopped torturing myself with social media. But Rachel still called. "Your mom tells everyone you're doing volunteer work in Africa," she said. "Some kind of education nonprofit. Very prestigious. Can't come home because you're changing lives overseas." I laughed. The bitter kind that scrapes your throat. She's lying to cover up that she disowned me. She's lying so no one asks questions, so she doesn't have to admit she kicked out her own daughter for being a teacher. Rachel paused. "Ingrid, she told Mrs. Patterson at the club that you were nominated for some international teaching award in Kenya. I hadn't left Virginia in 3 years. That's when I understood. My mother didn't hate me. She hated what my existence said about her. So she'd invented a version of me she could brag about. A humanitarian hero, conveniently unreachable. The real me, the one who taught 4th grade 90M away. I was already a ghost. I met Marcus Webb on a Tuesday in October, surrounded by pumpkins and giggling 9-year-olds. His farm, Webb Family Organics, was a local legend. 50 acres of rolling hills, heritage vegetables, a small orchard where families came every fall to pick apples and take photos against the red barn. I'd brought my 4th graders on a field trip to learn about sustainable agriculture. Marcus was waiting by the tractor when our bus pulled up, tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes and soil permanently embedded under his fingernails. He shook my hand and said, "You must be Miss Fairbanks. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you." His daughter was Lily, 5 years old, golden curls and a smile that could melt glaciers. She was in my colleague's kindergarten class, but I tutored her twice a week after her mother passed away from cancer the year before. "Lily is an incredible kid," I told him. "Smart as a whip, curious about everything." Something shifted in his face. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "She says you're her favorite teacher in the whole school, even though you're not technically her teacher." He smiled. Her words that field trip turned into a phone call. The phone call turned into coffee. Coffee turned into a picnic under the old oak tree on his property where Marcus asked about my family, and I told him the truth. "I don't have one," I said, "or they decided they don't have me." He didn't ask for details. He didn't push. He just handed me a slice of apple pie his late wife's mother had taught him to make and said, "Family isn't always blood, Ingrid. Sometimes it's the people who show up when everyone else leaves." That was the moment I started believing him. 2 years passed like pages turning in a book I was finally writing for myself. In 2022, Marcus and I got married. Not at a country club, not with 300 guests and a 12-tier cake. We exchanged vows under the oak tree, where we'd had our first real conversation with Lily as our flower girl and a handful of friends who'd become family. I officially adopted Lily that same year. The day the paperwork came through, she handed me a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. On the bottom, in wobbly kindergarten letters, she'd written, "My mom, my dad, me." I keep that drawing in my desk at work. Some days when the world feels heavy, I pull it out just to remember what matters. I finished my master's degree in educational leadership through night classes and summer sessions, typing papers at 11 p.m. after Lily was asleep, studying during my lunch breaks, determined to prove that ambition didn't require abandoning the students I loved. When a position opened up for assistant principal at Maple Creek Elementary, I applied. The interview panel consisted of 3 school board members, including Marcus, who recused himself from voting. I got the job anyway. Through all of it, I stayed invisible. No social media, no press releases, no proud announcements to the family that had erased me. Somewhere in Richmond, my mother was still telling people I was saving children in Africa. Somewhere in D.C., Bradley was still pretending he'd never had a second sister. Somewhere online, Victoria was posting photos of family dinners at tables that would never have a place for me. They had no idea who I'd become, and I wasn't ready to tell them. Not yet. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon in March 2024. Mrs. Fairbanks Webb. The voice was formal, precise. "This is Diana Chen. Apologies, Diana Morrison from the Virginia Department of Education. The board has reviewed your application, and I'm pleased to inform you that you've been selected as the new superintendent of schools for Clark County." I sat down on the edge of my desk, my legs suddenly uncertain. Superintendent, the position I'd applied for on a whim, never. Believing I'd actually be considered. Overseeing 12 schools, 4,000 students, 200 teachers. Are you certain? I managed. Your track record speaks for itself. Literacy rates up 18% in 3 years. Teacher retention the highest in the region. The mentorship program you developed is being adopted statewide. A pause. Dr. Hart specifically recommended you. She said you were the best educator she'd ever worked with. Eleanor Hart, my mentor from my first year teaching, now the state education commissioner. I hadn't spoken to her in months. The announcement hit the local papers 2 weeks later. Local teacher rises to superintendent. A small headline in the Shenandoah Valley Voice, complete with my photo from the school district website.